Hey everyone, so in this video we will build a chat with PDF app where users can upload documents, they can filter the search documents and then ask questions directly. Not just that, we will look at how we can add a chat widget to any website. We will also look at different scenarios that you might have to build your chat application for. So let's get started. So the way we are going to build this chat app is using LangChain. LangChain is a very popular open source library that makes it very easy to build search applications for PDFs, documents. It also allows you to use these agents and perform many different tasks. So the way we are going to use LangChain is using Flowise, as LangChain is a code-based library and Flowise makes it easy to drag and drop these elements on a canvas and get started from there. And our interface to users is going to be through Bubble, and we will connect Bubble to Flowise to build our no-code LangChain app. So today we are going to cover two different ways of deploying Flowise. One is using render.com, and we have been doing this in our previous videos. And second is going to be a different way. It's called Railway app, and it's very similar to render. We're going to test it out as well. And remember, both of these are temporary solutions until Flowise team deploys their cloud-based solution, which is going to make it easy for us to just log in and use our Flowise account. So first one is the usual way we have been doing, which is on render. So the first step is going to be to go to the Flowise repo, which has different instructions. So we're just going to be using this option, which is to fork the repo. So once you do that, you'll see you have an option to fork it. Since I already have it, it says it already exists for me, but for you, you could just go ahead and create the fork. Once you do that, you'll see it's available under your account. So once that is done, we can go ahead and go to render and deploy. And people who have the Flowise repo from last time or last videos, you'll probably see something over here that says to update or synchronize the branch. You could click this sync fork, and then there's going to be another button over here to synchronize again. Remember, if you do synchronize, it will give you all the latest features of Flowise, but that will delete your flows from previous videos or previous work that you had done. So that is something you might want to remember. You could download and then later on upload those flows for the updated functionality. So now you're going to head over to render.com and create an account, link your GitHub, and give all permissions. So I gave permissions for 2 of my accounts. And then you are going to create a new web service, and then you'll see a page similar to this, and you'll basically select the repo, which is Flowise, under your account. And once you do that, you'll see a page similar to this. I'll call this Flowise chat doc, and this is going to be your URL that will be available to you in a little bit. And then we will switch Docker to Node. And then if you were to look on Flowise repo, they have some instructions which says you can call these commands, and that's yarn and yarn install, and then yarn build. And then this is the start command that's also on the repo. And there's something that I have mentioned before as well. Free instance tends to sleep after 15 minutes of inactivity, so it's highly recommended to use at least starter. Although some folks have complained that even with starter, sometimes they have noticed their flows disappear, so that's where we're going to save it after every use. Now, other thing is to go in the advanced setting and then ensure that the auto deploy is off, or no in this case. So any changes to your repo is not going to directly affect the deployment, but you can come back and manually deploy again. And with that, you could create a web service. So once you do that, you'll notice that it's running those commands that we provided, and it will take a few seconds, so I would probably give it maybe half a minute or a minute or so. So with that, you'll notice that your service is live. It took about 5 minutes or so, and once it's live, then you have the link that you could follow to basically access your Flowise account. So the second app mentioned is railway.app. It's very similar to Render, where you could bring in code and deploy. So I realized while making this tutorial that there are some errors in deployment using Railway. So we probably are going to cover this in a future tutorial. So there are a few different options that I'm exploring, which can hopefully keep the Flowise flows persistent across use so it doesn't delete that. If you happen to find any solution, please let me know so we can benefit the community. So for now, we'll keep the render-based deployment, and then we can look into additional options in the future. So perhaps we start with a quick summary. I've covered this in previous videos as how document Q&A systems work. They basically have these two arms. One is document ingestion and the other is search or retrieval arm. In document ingestion, we want to take the document, PDFs in our case, and then extract the text out of it. And that text will be made into small chunks, and those chunks will be converted into vectors or numbers, which will be saved in a vector database. And in our case, we'll be using Pinecone vector database. So once we do that, anytime a user searches for a particular term or a meaning or a sentence or any question about the document, then first thing we do is we also convert that question to numbers and then compare those numbers to numbers, and there are usually a few relevant solutions that we send over to OpenAI for completion. And all of this we're going to be doing in Flowise. So just to make it easy, the way we will break down these two arms is splitting right by the vector database area. So we'll take this left portion and the right portion, flatten out, and then we'll work on these two flows in Flowise. So document ingestion will be the uploading part of our flow, where we take document from users and then upload it to Pinecone and follow this chain. And the second is the search in the app. So one could always start with a new flow or a blank canvas. What I'm going to be doing is go through some of the available ones in the marketplace and benefit from that. So I see there's one for conversational retrieval QA chain, and that's the one we can explore what it does. It's taking a text file and then upserts or basically saves the text embeddings in Pinecone, and then we can ask questions in a conversational fashion. So this is very similar to what we want to do. Instead, we would like to use a PDF block in our case. So I will use this template, and now it should be available to make changes. We will delete this, search for PDF loader, bring that over. So this makes it a bit easier for us to go from something which is available in the marketplace. So pretty much that makes our flow for PDF-based files. Now, you notice that there are a bunch of these blanks that we need to fill. So chunk overlap is basically if you split each document into different pieces. Now, how much of overlap do you want? It helps keep some overlap as context between each chunk. Second is all of these API keys. I've shown this in previous videos, how to create OpenAI API key as well as a Pinecone index and namespace. So I've filled out API keys as well as the environment and index. You could perhaps name this as test chat just to see if everything works fine. And I usually suggest to upload and test the flow, although we will make it where we'll connect it with Bubble and you can dynamically upload any PDF to it. So let's do a test with any test PDF. And I'm going to use the Constitution of the United States as the test file. And once you do that, you'll basically have to save. I'll probably call this PDF upsert. So with that, you should be able to now chat with the document. So you can ask a question, what is this document about? And what's going to happen is it will go through the flow as mentioned before, and it will upsert to Pinecone and generate the response for us. And if you were to go in your Pinecone account, you'll notice that the namespace test chat is created for us with vectors available in it. That means that we were able to run the flow. So next step for us, since we now completed document ingestion, we'll go to the search or retrieval. So now we want to create another flow similar. There is an option to duplicate chat flow, so this is something that we're going to use. We'll duplicate that, and instead of the upsert block, we want to use the other block, which is the search, or I believe it's let's see, load index block. So we're going to use that. So we'll delete this one, bring it over, connect this to our previous QA chain, and then you notice it just takes embeddings. So we'll give OpenAI embeddings, and it doesn't need any of this because we already upserted and have that flow available. So we'll delete this, and this should suffice for us. And again, we'll fill out these API keys. So I filled out all the details as before. Now I'm going to use the same test chat namespace just for testing it out again. So it should reach out to the same pinecone index and give us answers similar to the one that we have seen previously. Let's save this. We'll call this PDF query and then go from there. So now it should work as intended. Let's see. Okay, so it gives a similar answer. So that means that it connected to the proper source and it's given answers from there. So now our flows are built. So both of these are completed. We want to take this over to Bubble and connect it with a Bubble-based app. The most important part for us is going to be this portion, where if you look at curl or Python, any of those, there is a URL that we would like to use in our application. And then another cool thing that was released is this embed feature. So we'll start with this embed actually, and then we can connect with the rest of the APIs. Now, there is an option to have authorization. You could add a new key. The way you can do that is you have to go in this section, create a new key, give it some name. You could call this maybe in our case Bubble app, and then you have this API key that could be used for authentication in your application, so you're not getting any calls from unauthorized sources. So the other aspect that I would like to talk about is the input config. This is basically the configuration that will help us with many different aspects, especially with upload and query. If you look at these configuration, you'll see that there are nodes which are named OpenAI, there's something OpenAI embeddings, and then there are also Pinecone. What that resonates is basically the blocks that you have on your flow. If you were in this query flow, then you'll see the configurations are a little different than the upsert, which will have a few additional possibilities. So let's say, for example, if we take the Pinecone upsert block, we can see that it has three variables: the Pinecone environment, index, and namespace. Those are the ones that we basically input ourselves. So having that as a possibility to overwrite using our API call from Bubble gives us the dynamic behavior. So we can upload different documents, we can upload in different namespaces, different indexes. So that becomes possible with this new update on Flowise. So these might seem quite a few different settings, but we're going to use some of those. And for that, I would like to perhaps start with a few scenarios. So first thing is, let's say if you have a document base, this could be PDFs or it could be text or any sort of documentation. And your goal is to add a chat widget on your website at the bottom, which basically if you click it, you can search through documentation. So for example, if you were to go to LangChain's website, you'll notice that there is this chat widget that can help you search through documentation. And you don't have an option to upload or make changes, anything along those lines. So this is just a simple widget. In that particular case, you do not need any sort of input or upload from users. So just remember that. Now, second scenario is where you are part of an organization or a team or so, and you have many different documentation. There's another user, they also have different documents, and the end goal is for all of the documents to be in one vector database that could be then accessed through a chat app. Then in this scenario, you don't necessarily have to separate the documents uploaded by A versus B, because at the end of the day, it's part of same team or organization, and the goal is to help everyone search within the vector database. Now, third scenario is where you have multiple users and it's a website like chat-based or so, where each user's document needs to be partitioned and separated from the other user. And they have the capability to upload document as well as search within their document. In this case, we need to make sure that each user's document are in a separate namespace, perhaps. That's what we're going to do. So we will have 3 scenarios that we will work on in this video, and we will try to design our system accordingly. So for the first use case, the good news is Flowise have provided us with this embed code that you can just add to your website, and it will take care of adding the widget as well as making the search available. So one could take the code available. In our case, we are just gonna use a blank page as an example on Bubble, and the way you can embed that is you search for HTML tag, and then you can drop it anywhere, and within the code we are gonna insert script of the code that we got from Flowise. That should suffice building off this chat widget. So let's test it out. So once you hit preview, you can see there's this chat widget. It's also hidden behind this built on Bubble. Of course, if you deploy and pay, then this will disappear. And if you search the same question, it's gonna do the same thing, where it's gonna call the same Flowise app, and it will get you the answer. So if you have any pre-built website, or if your website is not about uploading documents or so, it's some landing page or something like what we have seen in LangChain, this already takes care of the queries for users, so you don't have to do anything after this. Now for the second and the third scenario, we're going to benefit from the metadata tag or filter available in Flowise, as well as we're going to utilize the namespace. So namespaces could be imagined as these partitions or separations where you can basically mask information from the other partition or other namespace. So if we are looking at a use case where you have an organization and the goal is to make all of the information easy to access, you can upload everything into one namespace, and then you don't necessarily have to make any additional partitions or namespaces. And that's what we're going to do in our example right now. Then we'll come back to a case where we can have multiple partitions or multiple namespaces and look at that in a little bit. So for this particular scenario, we will just keep the namespace as one namespace, and we will send files to this particular flow. And there are a few given examples. It might be a bit tricky to configure that in Bubble, so we'll walk through that. Now I have actually built an app which has a section to upload documents and then another section to chat with the document. I'll make this available with the video so you can look at the workflows. So for the document upload section, the main part is the file uploader, which is available as an input form. And I have some text which just shows what file was uploaded, name of the document, description. There could be many other fields that you could add to a file, and then process file button. And once this is clicked, I have separated it by 2 different scenarios, and we'll look at each of those. So in the scenario 2 that we're talking about, we will first create a document, and this is something called make a thing or so. Create a new thing, and then you can select document. And then I have taken those 3 input fields from the user, and then I just created a data table, so that new type, which is called document. These are tables in your Bubble app, and then I saved those 3 given user input. Now there could be more. For now we'll start with this, and we might modify in a little bit. So once you create a new document, then you want to send that document over to our Flowise API. And the way we have configured this API is, first thing, you need to add a plugin, which is API connector, and then you can name as Flowise API or so. And then authentication, if you have enabled authentication, then you can add your authorization, something along these lines, and then you add your token value to the right. So, since we're not going to be using that, so I'll just delete it. And for scenario 2, we basically take the URL that we had available from Flowise, and we have to set it as a form data. So this is the body type, as well as the data type is text. This is something that worked for me. There might be different ways, but this essentially worked without errors for me. Now we will take file as the file that we are going to send to the Flowise app, as well as Pinecone namespace. I'm just calling this like organizational docs or something along those lines, since it's just going to be common namespace for everyone. And once you do that, if you initialize, you'll have some sort of response saying I don't know or so, because it's actually asking the app for a question which we haven't supplied. That's the reason it's saying that. And just to verify that worked for us, we're going to go to Pinecone, and you'll see that we should have the org doc available for us. So now this means that our bubbles upload functionality is working fine. Now we can look at the querying side. All right, so now we can go back to our workflow and then utilize the plugin available to us. And I'm gonna say this is the value from step 1's file URL, since that's what we use to save the file, and then we send that over. So anytime the button is clicked, it creates a new document. It sends the document as the scenario 2 describes it. We're going to test it out. So before I select and send document, let's check what's going on in Pinecone. So we have in this our doc, so we have 448 vectors. This should change. So let's upload Constitution again. Take a second. It shows that okay, that particular file is to be uploaded. So now we can give it a name and then process file. This should initiate some sort of bar which indicates that we have our file being processed. It doesn't reset anything since we did not put any logic for it, but you see that the number of vectors have changed, which means that it did upsert. So just to make sure that this resets each time we have an API call made, we are just going to say reset relevant inputs, and that should take care of clearing out the form for next use. So that's for uploading a document and basically taking care of the scenario where we can send any document to that one particular namespace. Now we want to see how the querying could be done for that scenario. For querying, again, we'll come back to our PDF query flow. So, we have both of these. So in the section where we found our API URL, again, we're going to take this particular URL. That's what we're going to call from the query API, and a few additional things. If you were to look at the input config, there are quite some different keys available that we can search for. And any of these we could use as shown previously as form data. We'll add these keys. So in our case, we said namespace, so we'll be using that. And we'll probably gonna need the question itself. So let's go back to our API connector. So now I have a query API call. This is going to use the URL as we saw. Please make sure you have the header as content type application JSON. This gave me quite some errors, as well as the data type is text and the body type is JSON. And the way we can set our call is, if you remember, so we need to have question and then we have some value with that. That's what I have set as question and value. So in Bubble, if you use lesser than, greater than sign, that means that we would like to use it later on in our workflow. So first is question, then is override config. So if you look at the way it's set up here, we're going to basically take exactly that format, and then we have another curly braces inside, which will have a few additional keys that we will ask for. So basically override config, and then the only key we're using in this case is namespace. So then I've defined that in here. I'm keeping this private because it's locked. Basically, it's not going to be available anywhere in the application. You could keep it not private, but in this particular use case, we're assuming everything will be saved in one namespace. So once that happened, you can initialize the call. I did it, and then I received this response back. We could go back and actually build a workflow around it. So what I've done is I built this chat section. This is very similar to one of the apps we built in previous tutorials. So please feel free to watch that video. Also, I'm going to make this app available for you to learn any of the workflows. So as mentioned previously, it has messages that shows up here, and then one could input any queries or questions, and that will be sent to our API. So the way we're going to start is this button starts the workflow, and behind that button, the first thing we do is create a new message. So this is to help save messages in our local bubble storage before we send it over. I created a new thing, which is message, and then I have two values for the message table. So if we look at data type for messages and is user, these are the two that we're going to use right now. Type is something we could use. This is for saving history and sending history to the chat app. We're probably not going to be doing in this tutorial, but we'll do that in future tutorials. So I'm going to create a new message saying this is a user, yes, and then I'll reset relevant inputs. So it basically clears the input box for the user. Then I'm going to call the query. The only thing I'm going to send from here is the message because namespace is locked, as we saw. And once we do that, we get some response, and we take that response and then we save it to the database, and we see that it's not a user because it came from AI or the API. And then once that happened, we just basically scroll down to the bottom of the page. And the way that looks is, if I ask, what is this document about? It's going to call the API and get the response back. So this is kind of what we expected. This takes care of the second scenario, as we spoke about earlier, where all of the documents go into one namespace, and then a chat app is used to search through all of the document in that namespace. Now the third scenario is where you have one user where that user saves in one namespace, and another user who's going to have a separate set of documents that are going to be saved in a different namespace, and there are no overlaps when we are searching for that namespace. And the way we are going to design our system is we will say that each user's unique ID or unique name will be the namespace. So then we can identify which partition belongs to which user. And the second is that we will use metadata. This is something available in our upsearch. So if you were to look into PDF file block, then there is something called metadata, and it takes a similar structure what we have seen before as a JSON. So we'll go over that as well. And what we will do is in that metadata, we will give a certain name to the document. So let's say our user wants to search a document XYZ or document constitution. They can do that, or if they want, they can just search within the whole partition without any particular filter. So it will search in their namespace among all the documents available. So that is something we'll look at by filtering and searching. So the way that we can build that system in our app is everything looks fine with the initial setup. We are going to change the workflow a little bit. We start with creating a new document regardless. So we save the name that user provides us, description, and the file URL. And then the API call is going to be a little bit different than the one before. So this API call takes same URL that we had, so we don't necessarily have to change the URL, so it's the same URL as upsert. And then we add the metadata as we spoke before, so namespace remains same. One could start with a test doc as well as some test metadata. This helps just to make sure the API connector is working fine. So let's do that. I've already provided documents. So initially, once you select send file, it will give you an upload button, and then you can upload a document. I'm going to call this user a doc, and we'll call this metadata as document name, and I'm going to call this constitution since that's the document I'm sending. And with that, we should be good to initialize. Okay, so since we did not provide a question, it's saying that I don't know. And then if we were to look in our pinecone, we should see user a doc. So that's good. It means that we have created this partition or namespace for user a. Now, this is available for our workflow, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll take the API call, so this is scenario 3, and I'm going to call my metadata. I'm adding only one metadata, so that's the reason you see that I have a key and then I have a value that goes after the quotes. If I wanted more, I would say comma, and then I'll add more keys and values accordingly. So I'm just searching for the document name. And then I'm saying that the pinecone namespace will be current user's unique ID. So current user is something available, and then unique ID is made by Bubble. So it is for each particular user who registers on our website, there will be one unique ID. So it helps to send that, as it will be unique across your app. And then of course the link that we're sending to Upsert will be dynamic link. And once that happens, we can reset our input, so another document could be uploaded after that. Okay, so let's try again, where we select Constitution, and it's going to show us there. I'm going to call this a little different. Maybe I'll call this doc A, and then I'm just going to call this test doc. And then once we hit process, it should call the API, and the name of the document will be the metadata filter. This user's ID will be the partition. So let's give it a try. Okay, so it sent it, it cleared the form, which means it should be available for us in Bubble. So there we go. We have the namespace with this ID. This belongs to the user, and they have the vectors saved. And it also has the metadata filter. We're not able to see it in this view, but we can search for that. So that's what we're going to do right now. So what I've done is I created a new page, which is chat user, and I cloned it based on the original chat. So if you were to create a new page, you'll see there's an option to use original pages. So that's what I did, and then I'm adding a new section here, which is basically to select a particular document. And in this option, I'm saying that it's going to be a dynamic choice. This is a drop down, and the search for document will tell us what documents to provide in that document list, right? So we want to show each user their own documents that they have created in their namespace. I'm going to add a new constraint, which is created by the current user. So it will just search in that namespace, and then I can sort it out as needed. And then once we look for options, it's just going to show what this user have created. Now, the other thing is everything else remains same, messages, and we will configure the API call in a second. So this is basically a preview, and we see the documents, those were created by this particular user. Okay, so let's see how the workflow looks like. So once a user clicks send button, we can configure the workflow. It starts with creating a new message, as we have seen, and it saves the message with the user as yes. This type, we will use that in future. Basically, it's either user message or it's the API message. It helps with chat history. Now, the second step is just resetting the relevant inputs just to clear the input box. The third step is the API call. Now, this is the most important step, where we call our Flowise API. Now, as you see, there are a few different options. What I did was I added a new API. So our original API did not have the option to have the document metadata filter, so I just created based on that first one. And the only difference between that API and this is to override config. I'm adding these two keys and their particular values, which are configured in the body parameters. And I use these, which were used for testing for the API setup. And once we initialize that, it should search in that namespace for that document, and it should tell us what this document is about. So that's what it did. Now, since this is available, we have three different values that we can take from user. So that's what we're going to do. So we're saying current user's unique ID. For document name, we'll select that drop down that, if you recall, where we had to choose an option, and then we select that value. And the question is what user asked. We send that over. Once we get a response, we save that again to messages, and this time we say that it's not user, it's the API or AI, and then we go down to the bottom of the window. So just to test it out, I'll say I want to test in doc A. Probably it's a lot of times using the same document, but it just helps as a placeholder. Okay, so what is this document about? Nice. So what it did is it looked into that doc A section and it gave us an answer. We can also configure where it does not reset this input. So with that, basically what we have done is we looked at all scenarios. We looked at something, just a widget, which is the easiest. Then second is where all users can upsert to one namespace, and then each user upserts to their particular namespace, and also filtering through that. And the functionality as shown there, this filter can allow them to filter by document and search within that. If you do not select an option, it will search in the whole user namespace, so anything within that could be searched, which is also helpful. And then we configured various workflows as well as API calls. Of course, there could be other API calls that could be configured in addition, sending chat history that will look in the future, as well as perhaps deleting these namespaces or deleting document. So many other possibilities. I just wanted to highlight the new functionality of embedding chatbot as well as uploading document and making it available for each user to handle separately. So one last thing I would like to talk about is saving these workflows. So you could export this chat flow and it downloads to your computer. There's that option, or you could go back to where all of your chat flows are and then export database. In that way, it exports all of these so you can later on import into your Flowise. So I will make this Bubble app available where you can view through all of the settings and mimic that. So that concludes our tutorial for today. If you know of any business or organization who would like to build these chat applications for their knowledge base or their documentation, feel free to let them know about Menlo Park Lab. We are helping out businesses and organizations to build these apps and deploy them. In addition, there have been quite some interest of people reaching out asking to build a course starting with the basics of Bubble and then going from there on to no-code based LangChain app development and deployment. So if there is an interest of such a course, please do let me know. Thank you so much and see you next time.